Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons, your favorite tabletop role-playing game, podcast, thingy stuff, and so on. I'm Shawn Merwin here with my nicely lit co-host, Teos Abadia. Hey, Teos, you're looking mighty fine today.
Yeah, I don't know. My computer continues to go through some things, and today it just decided, I don't even know what your lighting system is. Let's just default to everything. So we'll troubleshoot that later and just enjoy me being whiter than usual.
Oh, okay. That's
and if you're listening at home, just imagine the whitest Teos you can. I'm
as white as anyone could ever be. So we're in this together.
That's fair.
We're in this together. What you are not in is the middle of a snowstorm of epic proportions, which I have been. For the last couple of days, there has been much use of a snowblower going on.
Wow.
Today it's calmed down a little bit, but
yeah, that sounds fun. So do you? Yeah, do you have supplies? Are you in danger?
Oh no, we did the whole let's make sure we have enough food. We haven't had to leave the house in 3 days, except to dig out just in case. But apparently the town I live in, Dunkirk, made the CBS News. So I was getting messages from folks saying, "Hey, don't you live in that area?" I'm like, "I live right smack dab in the middle of that area." So
are you writing all frost themed adventures, frost themed monsters,
cold and wet themed stuff.
Nice.
The last thing I wrote will have water elemental creatures and a potion of cold resistance. Just spoilers. There you go. But the wider world around me goes on, apparently, and our listeners are out there in the world living their lives too. And sometimes they communicate with us, and we love that, and we read them on the air and answer. We're going to start with Carol XS via YouTube. You mentioned player types in the last episode. Do you think it's fine for DMs to have a type as well, or should they learn to adapt to any type of player? I ask this because I'm thinking about DMing online after being a long-time in-person player, and I feel it's daunting to recruit online players who are strangers. I'm not sure how to do it. I've been thinking about matching player types determined from a questionnaire to my DMing style. Any thoughts on that? That's two separate questions. One is about the types and one is about recruiting. So let's start with the first one. Is it okay for DMs to have a type, a style? Absolutely. I think it's just as fine for DMs to have a style or a type as players have a style or type. But this is a communal experience. Just as DMs should be accepting of different player types, players should be accepting of different GM or DM types. As long as, say it with me, everyone is having fun. Now,
there's no crying in D&D.
Yes, right. Except for all the times there is.
Yeah.
Gaming is a special case in that there is the central person. Tabletop role-playing games, there's generally a game master, a dungeon master for D&D. It's the central person who has a little bit more responsibility than the rest of the players in general. So while it's fine for the GM to have a type, one thing they need to do is make that clear from the start. Let the players know, this is how I like my games to run. This is how I like to play. This is what brings me joy in role-playing games. If what brings me joy brings you distress, then we are not going to be able to play. I would respect a game master, a DM who comes in and says, "Hey, I don't like this role-playing stuff. I just like combat with a little bit of exploration." And I'd be like, that's cool. Your game's not for me, but I respect you telling me that so we don't waste time. What do you think, Teos?
Yeah, I actually think it's interesting to player types. I was watching a video that was talking about player types, and it made it sound like it was something that showed up in the 2024 DMG when it was in the 2014 DMG. Both 4E DMGs, the third edition DMG, right? Why? Because Robin Laws, is Robin Laws?
Mhm.
I think Robin Laws has been
Yeah.
writing about this for quite some time prior to the
Yeah.
original person who wrote about it. You and I even did a Gen Con talk many, many years ago for Baldman Games about it. It's been around
Yeah.
forever, but not GM types. And
Yeah.
the point of player types isn't actually to say, this is the kind of player I'm allowing in my game, right?
Mhm.
The point of it is to recognize what your players like and then give a little more of that. And I would say that GM types should be the same way. If we're going to create GM types, which I think is actually kind of cool, then what it is it's a tool for your players to know how to play to the GM style, right?
Mhm.
And yes, maybe we find, well, we don't like that player type, and so, or that GM type, and so we really should be in a different situation. But that's not the point of like a GM type, in my opinion. The point of it is to know what to shoot for. So if your DM loves tactical stuff with minis and monsters that do cool things, playing to that will make your GM happier, right? Or if your GM is just giving you all these real cool story seeds and things to explore and discover and do with, and you don't do anything with that, you're not playing to your GM, and your GM will be less happy, right? So I think to me, it's less of an on-off, yes, no, and more of a, what are the qualities you're looking for? And that's what I would push forward into the second part of the question. I don't know what you think.
No, I think that's right. And then so the second part of the question becomes a little clearer then, where you can say as the game master, hi, I'm looking for players. We're going to play online. And here's how my game is probably going to run.
Yeah.
Because this is what I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
What you just want to be careful about is being too adamant or not being adamant enough in what you ask. So if you are someone who wants a particular game and will be unhappy if that particular style takes a backseat to another style, then you need to say that.
Yeah.
Or if you like a particular type of game, but you're fine with little bits of role playing or little bits of combat or little bits of power gaming or little bits of whatever, you can say, 90% of the time, this is how I want the game to go. But I do like to bring in other styles. So be clear about that as well. Be honest with yourself so you can be honest with the players.
Yeah.
If that is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of things, like, it's not that big a deal, right? Like, if you like to, role play a fair bit with your characters, most players will meet that to some reasonable level. And whether they're in or out in terms of you wanting to have them in your gaming group will not so much be around that, but maybe the larger picture of what they're like to play with. But if what you're going to do is run like an intrigue heavy campaign, and you're going to have lots of ballroom scenes and things like that, that is definitely not for all players. And that's where you want to communicate the type of game you're going to run and see whether they're good with it. And I like what you're saying of sort of like communicate the type of game you're going to run, paint that picture, and then naturally people will know, yeah, that's a fit for me or it's not, right? We're going to do an endless dungeon where we, every week are crawling through different levels of it. Lots of combat, lots of excitement. And so some folks will go like, yeah, that sounds like it would tire me out.
Yeah. Yep. And that leads us very neatly into our next question from Pierre, who sent us an email. And you can email us your questions, comments, thoughts to masteringdnd@gmail.com. Pierre says, I am often torn between maintaining an exciting pace for my game and providing a sandbox style environment where, period. When urgent things happen, for example, the villain is completing an evil ritual in this dungeon over there, the players tend to go there immediately, leaving little room for player agency in deciding what to do next. When no urgent things are happening, I feel the energy of the game start to sag a little as the players weigh their options, have endless breakfast scenes, etc. What are your thoughts on this quote unquote problem? Is there an answer to this other than just alternating between periods of urgency and periods of calm decision making? As an addendum, I know the answer is always talk to your players to see what they want. Smiley face. I would be more interested in your personal experiences. All right, so I'm going to take a first swing here, and I'm going to surprise you, hopefully, by giving you a Dr. Gregory House answer. If you remember the show House, the medical drama on Fox, he says, patients lie, and I'm going to say right now, players lie. Not even now knowing that they're lying, but they will say things like, "Oh yeah, I'm cool with blank." But then really not be cool with blank. So what do? You do the trust but verify, right? You say to yourself, all right, they said that they like sandbox games, but I'm going to watch them when I run a sandbox game and see if they like it like they say they like it. And then that's where you get your answer by looking at their reactions. Now, maybe that lag in energy is a bad thing. Maybe that lag in energy is exactly what is needed after an intense thing. That's something that you can talk about, but you also need to just observe. And going back to the first question, if that lag in energy is something that you don't like and it feels bad to you, then that's also something that needs to be addressed. What do you think?
Yeah. So I look at this sandbox question the same way I look at sort of choices in adventure, right? If you're in a dungeon and you could go towards the mines or towards the towards the barracks, and it kind of doesn't really matter a whole lot, then it's just a choice. Well, let's start with the mines, and in the same way, if you finish killing off the evil villain that was doing the ritual, and then there's just sort of like, and now what do you want to do? I don't know, maybe I'll craft a thing, or I'll go talk to the king and just see what they're up to. There's not a lot going on there, so it's kind of fine, but none of it necessarily feels like it matters a whole lot. You get choices, but there is definitely no urgency right there, and there's no momentum or energy behind it. So if you want that energy, then there have to be some options there, right? And something that matters. So you've defeated the villain, but the villain left a cryptic note or a strange item, and you just know it has to be related to something else. Maybe it even has something that suggests is related to something else they've seen. Now, someone will want to research that, hopefully, and that can have a lot more interest to it, right? Or an NPC has gone missing right when you think everything is resolved. Right? Think about TV shows and how they do those kinds of things. And you're just as interested in that, hopefully, as you were in the combat scene, because the story hinges on this, right? Something to do with somebody's backstory or whatever. And now those areas lend themselves a lot more to things like downtime and so on. And it shouldn't sag a bit, right? And that's the ideal thing, where really, if you think of downtime as a going around the table, tell me one thing you want to do. The ideal situation is that that everybody has multiple things they'd like to do. Things related to the adventure, things related to their backstory, things related to their goals. And that's where it gets really exciting. So the more you aim towards that, the less that you'll feel that energy sagging.
Yep. That's why the Acquisitions Incorporated campaign I ran was one of my favorite campaigns ever. Because there was this urgency to do the thing. But then at the end of that, there was this release of tension.
Yeah.
Yes, we know we have to take the next step, but the next step isn't quite known yet. So let's focus on this other thing while we let that tension rise back up.
Yeah.
Stories are linear for the most part, right? Stories have a cause and an effect. They have a decision and a consequence. They have action and a reaction. They have highs and they have lows. And stories forever have had these because it's what people respond to.
Yeah.
And even in the best sandbox games, whatever that might be, at some point, something dramatic has to happen that the players can react to.
Right,
like you said, if you just say, here's the world, do anything you want.
Right.
Players who say, I love a sandbox game, generally just sit there and go, what should we do?
Yeah. If you can go
And
to the forest or
things,
the hills and there's nothing driving you particularly, well, it's just a choice
right.
of forest or hills with nothing really to make it exciting. Right.
Right. And so what a lot of players end up doing is like, well, I make a history check to know about these areas. And what they're doing is they're looking for something to react to.
Yeah.
And so just give them the thing to react to, which is what stories want.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like your sandbox game is going up exactly as a sandbox game would.
Yeah.
Right? The players go along, you give them the freedom to do the things, but then all of a sudden they need to respond to something, and that's when the tension starts. And so that's when that action and that rising, and if that rising thing is what makes you feel good, and you look at the players and it's when they're the most, then raise that a little bit more and see if it's still. Now, if we raise it too high and all of a sudden players are getting overwhelmed, then you can lower it back down and have a couple of more breakfast scenes.
Yeah.
Right.
And
that's what you're always doing.
Yeah. If you, and the way to do that is that in an adventure, you lack, like in that combat sequence, in the dungeon, in the ritual stopping, you don't have the time to do larger things. But you can, and that's where you as DM can expose that there is the possibility for these larger things, right? So they explore the hills and they find a mine that is abandoned. But if someone were to put resource to this, and if you had people, you could rehabilitate this mine. It's been lost to history. And then in some other place, they find information about the mine, right? And so now you've got a lot of impetus to say, if you all do something with the mine, it could yield things for you. You can't do that while you're fighting the evil necromancer. That is exactly what those in-between moments are for. And now they become more exciting because, hey, everybody, let's start that mine up. All right, how can I recruit some people? Well, and I'll go, research the history of the mine further, or, whatever it is. And that's where you can, as DM, have all these things and go like, yeah, you're going to need some supplies. You're going to need to trade with the elves for wood to shore up the mine. You're going to, all this sort of stuff. And that's where you get into all this kind of excitement. And it's sandboxy because it's reacting to their desires, right? But you've planted various options and seeds throughout. And now it starts to all matter, right? Now we have a reason to go to the mine, and to the hills yielded something, the forest something else, and the order in which we dealt with it mattered, and yet we might want to go back and all that.
Yeah. And you had mentioned like PC backstories before. PC backstories, it's the same thing, right? If you think you're running a campaign that's all about the characters and their relationships and their struggles and their goals, at some point you have to put the tension in there. And the character backstory with their family, with their friends, with their enemies are just a different form of putting in the tension and the drama in front of them.
Yes.
Which is fine. It's just that's always got to be there at some point, unless you're running like the most laid back, we're just going to explore to see what the world is.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly an okay way to play, but it's not what most players are looking for in a game.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
All right. So we have other questions, but we are going to get to the news now. And our news starts with a new role-playing game from Wizards of the Coast. What?
Asterisk.
So, asterisk, yes. So we learned last week that Hasbro was working on a new video game called Exodus. Well, actually, we learned that a long time ago, but we mentioned it again last week. The company that is working on that game is actually a subsidiary of Wizards of the Coast, a company held by Wizards of the Coast. And they said that they were going to create a new IP around this video game called Exodus. So Exodus would be its own video game and have its own world. And now we're learning that they're going to have a role-playing game that's not created by the D&D design team to go along with this video game.
This could be our
Teos.
shock face thumbnail for the week. I mean, we should just lean into that. Yeah. So I definitely want to go back to that part, but to share some more information here, the We hear that this video game and the RPG will focus on your destiny to lead a group known as the Travelers, quote, in the hunt to steal alien weapons and technology from the most powerful enemy in this universe, the Celestials. Which is a shame because I was sure this was going to be an RPG about the Bob Marley song, but different folks. And there's some effect called time dilation, where choices you make create consequences, reshaping the future of your entire civilization for generations. Sounds really cool. Yeah. So what do we know, Shawn?
Well, we know that. Then we also know that if you join the video games mailing list as a founder by December the 10th, so you have about a week to do that, you can then purchase the Exodus Traveler's Handbook at a special price. There is a warning that quantities are limited and there's no guarantee that you will receive a book. So the Exodus Traveler's Handbook is the role-playing game. It sounds like the maybe player's handbook. So what is this role-playing game about? Well, it's being designed by James Olin,
of course,
who is the creative lead behind the video game. And he's worked on various D&D supplements in the past that have been put up on the DM's Guild. Minsk and Boo's Journal of Villainy, Heroes of Baldur's Gate, and Chains of Asmodeus are three of the titles that James Olin has worked on. After he joined this company that was part of Wizards of the Coast, he could not sell them for profit, though. So they are up, I believe, as charity.
I'm not sure that's... I know that's sometimes been the case, but I think they are actually... I don't know how James Olin kind of gets away with it when other Wizards of the Coast staff can't, to be honest. There's something... Because I think it was originally for like something like that, but I don't know that it still is.
Okay. Well, that's what I remember at one point I saw. It was Chains of Asmodeus, definitely, where it said, profits from this or a portion of this maybe was going to the Wizards of the Coast, not Child's Play, but the other one. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's all neither here nor there. What else is James known for? Well, there was a little video game called Baldur's Gate 1, another one called Baldur's Gate 2. You may have heard of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic or the small title called Dragon Age Origins. Well, James was involved in the creation of those. Any other news along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think just going back to this, that if I were on the Wizards design team, and I do not speak for them, I don't work for them. I got an email the other day saying something like, "Since you're at Wizards," I'm like, no, there's just, from the peanut gallery here. But if I were on the D&D design team, I would be like, how does this guy keep doing this? Like putting out very official looking and sounding kind of supplements. And now he's even building an RPG on this thing. And so that's just if I were a team member. If I were the head of the D&D design team, I would say, why is some other group doing this? Not because of some power struggle tendency in me, though, someone may have that, but just because we are either a very good design team or we aren't. And if we are, you should, you Hasbro should want us designing this thing. Why is someone else designing this? Why is it being done disconnected from everything? So this is either a throwaway product, in which case, why is that happening? Or it's important, and then why isn't the D&D design team behind this? To me, this is really weird, and if I were inside there, I would be asking questions about how this kind of keeps happening. Why are we creating this, Heroes of Baldur's Gate supplement and making it in some kind of weird way, right? Why does James get this wild pass organizationally? I don't know James at all. I'm sure he's a wonderful person, and obviously super creative and talented. So I'm not questioning that at all. But organizationally, it keeps being really strange.
I could see the 3 supplements that go up on the DM's Guild, but this RPG, do you still think that they have the bandwidth to take that in-house? Do you think they shouldn't be working on other RPGs other than D&D? I'm not sure
if that conversation is happening. And by the way, I did check, and you're right. All proceeds of Chains of Asmodeus go to Extra Life, all profit. So you're totally right on that. If a conversation was had, that's totally cool, right? If the D&D team was asked, hey, do you want you to do this, or James to do this? Here's what it's about. And there's smart people talking and it's all being talked out. Hey, great. But if not, then there's that. If it's someone's assuming, because again, it's either important or it's not. Right? This is something I deal with in my day job all the time, consulting with companies. Like, this is either an important activity or if it isn't. And if you're spending all this time on it, it sounds important. Then shouldn't a group that's really good at it be doing it? And with the editorial team and the development team and all of this,
Yeah. No, I definitely understand where you're coming from.
Those, yeah.
It's just a question of I think that we're at the point where we assume that this hasn't happened because we know how organizations work.
Yeah.
And we've worked in large organizations where the right hand has no idea what the left hand is doing, and the feet are doing something completely different. And so it is interesting to know or to think about what resources are being used, what sort of push will be behind this.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with folks where it's like, well, we need to keep so-and-so happy, and so-and-so wants to do this thing. We're going to let them do their thing. We're not going to put a big marketing push behind it. We're not going to throw a lot of money into it. We're just going to let them do their things because they're really good at their job, and we want them to continue to do the thing that we hired them for. So
except
it is
if the point of this video game, and we just talked last week about, there was an analyst that said video games are super competitive, good luck. The one place where you can have a real big difference and make success is where you have an established IP. So here we don't have an established IP, but they're trying to build one. And so if you're trying really hard to build a new IP around this Exodus thing, and you've made this video game, then it isn't a throwaway thing. Right. Or you can't be on both sides of the fence. It's either important or it's not. And so, yes, maybe someone said, just let James put out another of his supplements. He loves doing this. It keeps him happy. We're all for it. Everybody wins. But if it ends up being a huge runaway hit and people want to then play this, like with the G.I. Joe RPG and Transformers and My Little Pony, right? It's either important or it isn't. And you farmed it out to another company to do it. Right, so Renegade Game Studios did it, and these RPGs are basically always on sale. You do not see them played all over the place, and why? Well, nobody's pushing it marketing wise, right? And there could be a lot of reasons for it too, but it doesn't receive the emphasis that it would have had it been an official Wizards of the Coast design team product, possibly. And so maybe there's a lesson there about kind of the emphasis you give things, and right,
Yeah, it's an interesting question too, because my mind has been on world building recently. And one of my thoughts is, if you have created a story Bible, a world Bible for this system, for this video game that you're making, it's all sitting there. How much work is it to take it, if you use an existing game system, and just say, well, we've already got 75% of the work done for it, sort of a world thing. Right. So we'll throw in some mechanics on top of it, and there you go.
Right. Or hire Rich Lescaflair, take his sci-fi 5e, give me your story, we're done here, right? Like, it can be a real quick.
Right. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing to think about, business-wise, game design-wise, industry-wise.
Yeah.
So we'll obviously be keeping an eye on that, although I have a feeling I will not be able to secure what was it called? Exodus Traveler's Handbook.
Yeah. I joined the mailing list just in case, it sounded a big deal. Like, if you join as a founder, I was like, ooh, how much money is that? Oh, well, it's their mailing list. So, join the mailing list, and maybe you could, and we'll see what the special price is and how that all works.
Right. Yeah. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on. Also interesting to keep an eye on is the Secret Lair D&D trailer. This Amazon show will have an episode for various games and properties, including the one for Dungeons and Dragons. The trailer came out. I believe it had a big picture of some five-headed dragon doing some shenanigans. And the show itself will debut on December 10th.
Yeah, there was another trailer that had a little more. It showed some kind of battle on a bridge and a gnome casting a fire spell and things like that. So it's cool. So hopefully it's a very good involvement. And I think there is also an Exodus secret layer as well, I believe. So we'll see.
Okay.
And Exodus has a novel, so a lot going on there.
There you go. A multi-pronged marketing approach. And multi-pronged IPs coming to D&D Beyond. We've reported on several different third-party properties and rules and content coming to D&D Beyond. We have 2 more that have come recently to D&D Beyond. The first is MCDM's Illrigger class for 5th edition. And the second is Free League's Lord of the Rings game coming to D&D Beyond. So that's a lot to take in. Teos, you start with the Free League's offering here.
Sure. This one's super interesting because the Lord of the Rings game comes from the One Ring RPG by Free League, then turned into a 5e version. And to do that, because it's a different type of system that's going on in the One Ring, they made a number of changes to 5e. So when you play the Lord of the Rings role-playing, you are not supposed to, in 5e, right? You are not supposed to just be, a warlock, whatever, at the table sitting there along with your hobbit. You are supposed to switch to the system that they have, which is 5e compatible, but you're supposed to kind of live in that character side of things. So there are 6 callings, which are instead of classes, 6 heroic cultures of Middle-earth, which aren't really, they kind of skip backgrounds and weave that into aspects of the species. Rewards, which are traits that improve gear, and the gear list is different, and so on. And we are told that all of the maps and tokens have been integrated into D&D Beyond's tool set. So as you usually get the digital book integrated, and then you get these various tools for like character building. And immediately one of the questions I saw a lot of folks asking is, well, how good is that integration? Like, this is a true test of D&D Beyond integration. And Jared Rasher beat my analysis as usual with a great review on his website, whatdoiknowjr.com, where he goes into the awesome detail he is known for, and he looks at things like skills. So there are special skills that exist only in the Lord of the Rings role-playing game that aren't in 5e. Those skills are not added to D&D Beyond as new skills. They appear in the book itself, but they aren't in the character generation step. And what that means is you're making a Ranger of the North, calling/class. They get a choice of 5 of 7 skills, and they aren't present as D&D skills. Or 5 of the 7 skills they should be able to choose are not present as D&D skills. There is new gear, and when you look at gear, it'll show up like there's a Lord of the Rings section for the new stuff. But the existing things that exist in the game aren't listed in that bottom area. They're in the normal area, so you don't know which weapons are also for Lord of the Rings and might play off of your skills and so on. And so there are a number of things like that. And what's really great is Jared actually provides a process for you. If you're going to make a character using D&D Beyond, here is what you should do, such as don't select skills early in character creation because you'll need those slots later to take the ones that aren't in the integration and other important steps. It's interesting to see.
Yeah. And another, the question of licensing is one that's big too.
Yeah.
Right. Because obviously, Free League does not own the Lord of the Rings IP. They licensed that from the Tolkien estate. So when the license that Free League has runs out, assuming that it does, what happens to this content?
Yeah.
This is the first time, I think, where we've had that sort of one-off. Normally, the stuff that's been integrated is owned by the company that Wizards is dealing with directly.
And you're talking about direct sales versus an online database.
Right. Yeah. So lots of interesting questions there. The second bit of content that's gone up is MCDM's Illrigger. This is a class created by MCDM, a big hit with its fans, and it is the 5th edition class that now is available on D&D Beyond. I saw the very, very, very first iteration of the Illrigger. I know that they updated it afterward, and then assuming that I would be talking about it on some other podcast, I actually bought it and looked it over. And then we ended up not really discussing it in detail. So what to you, Teos, is how was this integration?
Yeah, it's pretty good in that. I have not looked at actually making the character, so I can't speak to that. But what's interesting to me, just reading through it, Sadie Lowry, who headed up the second version of it for the MCDM team, you get exactly what was given out. Back when I was a Patreon person receiving, I mean, I still am, but as a Patreon supporter of MCDM, I received that version of it, and you still have like Sadie Lowry's introduction, the in-world fiction that Matt wrote, new spells, retainers, which are very MCDM in style items, that all appears there. So I was wondering if it would have been kind of 5e-ified more to be less like MCDM's flavor, but nope, it's there, which isn't surprising given that we have other MCDM books on D&D Beyond as well. And we should say what an Illrigger is, which is that they are, rigging ill. They are the elite operatives for archdevils. And so there are subclasses that kind of speak to being more like an evil knight, an assassin, mage, terror commando of hell. And you're supposed to command the battlefield, so it's got a little bit of warlord kind of feel, disrupt enemy factions, carry out the archdevil's infernal will. And so it's a little bit like a warlock in that sense of you have this patron behind you that's guiding your approach to things, granting you power.
I'm watching all of this content go up with great relish, with great trepidation as well, because I know that I am working on things that will be going up on D&D Beyond, especially a class.
Yeah.
That's huge, right? That's something that really takes attention, focus, and iteration. And so I'm seeing what's going up and seeing how much leeway that there is to step outside the bounds of a normal class. And so all of this is fascinating. And I am not going to, I'm going to bite my tongue with the understanding that it will be my derriere sitting in the hot seat at some point. So all I could say is congratulations to these folks, and I hope people are out there enjoying this content.
Yeah, and when your DM launches that Lord of the Rings game, then you show up with your Illrigger and go, what?
There you go. Speaking of showing up and going, what? PAX Unplugged is taking place December 6th through 8th. So when this show drops, you will be able to listen to it maybe on your way to PAX Unplugged. With all the normal shenanigans there, Bald Band Games will also be at the con running several events, some Adventurers League play, some Learn to Play, the D&D 50th Anniversary Play Series, such as Scions of Elemental Evil, using 4th level pre-gens. And then you get the big show, the Acquisitions Incorporated Live, from 8:30 to 11 Friday night Eastern Time. It will be also live on Twitch.
Very cool.
I will not be in attendance this year. I doubt Teos will be in attendance this year. But if you're going there, Godspeed, travel safe, and have fun. We also get an article from Gnome Stew on adventure design combining encounters. So JT Evans, one of the gnomes, has another great blog, this time discussing how to create interesting encounters by layering different encounter effects. I love the gnomes. I love Gnome Stew, love JT Evans. And what does this article talk about, Teos?
He has a number of great ideas he walks through. I'll share two of them that really spoke to me. Boss leadership, where your villain or boss can boost other creatures in some way. hinder the characters in some way or affect the environment in some way. And the mooks, the other underling creatures, are occupying the characters, keeping them from easily reaching the boss to end that effect, right? That's a really neat setup. Mook teamwork. Mooks can work together to use tactics such as grappling, pushing, and so on. And JT Evans gives the example of like a bunch of little creatures that all swarm the fighter and just grapple them to keep them from getting to the target that they should normally be attacking, right? And how fun that can be. And you can imagine, just even like pits and like, oh, we're going to just make a bunch of checks until we succeed at tossing, the wizard into the pit so they don't have a sight line or something like that. It's actually kind of fun. I don't think I've ever done anything like that, and I like that idea.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, Gnome Stew has great articles on all sorts of games, game design, folks. So you could check that out at gnomestew.com with a link in our show notes directly to that article. Let's talk Creator Corner. First, Mike Mearls announced that he is taking a new position as lecturer in game design at the University of Washington. Mike will be teaching at least one class on game design there. So
cool.
We wish him luck. I hope it goes well. I can't wait to talk to Mike to see what he's teaching, because
you guys
I may
can
have
compare
to steal something.
syllabi.
Yeah, there you go. And next, the Monstrous Menagerie has a Kickstarter currently going. This is an EN World project with more than 300 monsters for Level Up 5e, also compatible with your 5th edition game. What are some of the things that the book involves?
Yeah, so this second book includes heroic monsters, which gain levels like PCs, horde monsters that are meant to outnumber the PCs, and epic villains suitable for all kinds of cinematic battles going up to CR 28. There are a number of things about the book that I dig, and we were provided an advanced copy. Thank you to Ian World for that. The work of Paul Hughes is amazing. He has so much smarts about how monsters work, the math of them in the game. There's a recent episode of Ian World where he talks through the design behind the book. And some things I liked paging through this was the lore tables for monsters, which include things like false rumors someone might have heard. I think that's a nice touch. Monsters generally have a monster signs section. So the idea that like if there's a big behemoth beetle, right, with these giant pinchers, you would find skeletons snipped in half before you face it, right? And those are kind of neat ideas to think more, more broadly about the encounters you're setting up with these monsters. So there's a lot of nice attention done here. I love the work for that.
Yeah, and that Kickstarter will end on December 12th, so about a week after this show drops. So make sure you check that out. Again, it's Monstrous Menagerie II from EN World and EN Publishing. That was our news and commentary section.